All right, so welcome everyone. We're just about ready to get started. It's been a while since I have done any US chess school stuff, but it's good to be back and seeing some fresh faces. So let's get this show on the road. What we're going to look at today is a game that I played many years ago with Timur Gareyev at this was 2015 US Championship. And I think it was an interesting game, and we're going to take a look and see some critical moments. So, the game's anyone who knows Timur knows that he's not big on studying mainline theory and often mixes things up a bit. So he starts with the move f5. This is called the Schliemann Gambit, which I think is actually a bit better than its reputation. It certainly doesn't equalize, but it's tricky, and white should be reasonably well prepared. So does anybody know what white's most critical try is here? So Kirk is saying no. So okay. So Aryan Goodla says I think it is d4. A couple people have given me d4. I actually don't think d4 is a great move. Does anybody know how black is supposed to respond here? There's a very critical resource that he has that keeps his position reasonable. This is important to know. But give me a real line, please, not just one move. And when you're answering, make sure that you're typing to me privately so that everybody else in the Zoom meeting doesn't see what you say. We're looking over an old game of mine. But so here, d4 is not a great move, but it's just good warm up. Does anybody know how black responds to punish this move? Because you have to be a bit careful. So far, nobody has given me a good answer. So, like, if e takes d4, I think e5 is supposed to be good. And then you will lose back to d4 pawn, and the position just seems very skeptical. Also, e takes f5 might be pretty reasonable. There's a very key point that nobody has found yet. We need to find the way for black to equalize. Someone has called for fe4, take, and bishop c5, but probably queen d5 is a big problem. e6 might not be bad either, but queen d5 really looks like an issue. So let's try to see from here, what does black do? This is just a good warm-up. It has nothing to do with the game at hand, but we're making sure we're all paying attention and calculating well. Because black's position is actually under a fair amount of pressure. Strategically, like he's moved the f-pawn, you have to be very direct here. So for example, someone says Frishi is saying knight f6, d e5, knight e4, but I think this position looks horrible for black. You'll really struggle to get castled, and the f5 pawn sticks out like a sore thumb, and this is not great. There's a very important resource here. d5 from Kirk. That is an aggressive move that looks really off to me. Knight takes e5, and I think it's bad news. All right, so Venkata, I think you got this right. Do you want to turn on your microphone and share with us?
Yeah, so there you can just take the e4 pawn, and if they take e5, they take with the pawn, and then you have c6 because you always have queen f5 check to take the pawn on e5.
This is a very important tactical resource, because if white was able to maintain material parity, I think you'd be in massive trouble. So I think d4 sadly doesn't work because of that resource. But in this game, I played d3, and there came fe4, de4, knight f6, castle. And so Seth Rahman wrote a course on Chessable on the Schliemann, and I think if anybody wants to play the Schliemann, first of all, I'd caution you, you're probably not going to equalize, but if you want to do it, Seth Rahman's course is definitely the place to go. And I'm pretty sure he recommends d6 here, because but somehow I don't believe black can really equalize with d6, locking in his bishop. So of course the more ambitious move is to play bishop c5. And here it's I mean, fundamentally, black's position is totally sound. All he has to do is castle and play d6, and obviously he's completely fine, and then can even look for an initiative on the f file or whatever. But here there's a very critical thing white can try. So what should we play with white here? A couple people have given me some tries, but I don't think they're great. Okay, so like people, when you say, okay, a3 because if knight e4, queen d5, okay, fine, I can't take your pawn, but why can't I castle? Isn't that kind of what I want to do? Bishop g5, I guess that does stop castling. So, you know, if we're looking for ways to like stop black from castling, a couple of people have suggested bishop c4. That's not totally ridiculous. Bishop g5, but basically here, while you're stopping me from castling, because I will, if we castle here, there's this tactic that we can take this one, and then there's a check on d5. This is only temporarily stopping it because of d6. And so if black can play d6 and castle short, he's going to be totally fine. And it doesn't really matter which order he plays these moves in if he can do both of them. So a couple of people have given me bishop c4. I think this is much more serious than anything else we've discussed yet. Still, I'm not impressed. Let's say we go d6. My problem is I don't believe this bishop is very secure on the c4 square. Knight a5 is going to be annoying. And I also, it's not that far-fetched for black to castle queenside. Like queen e7, bishop g4, castle long does not seem that difficult to pull off. So I think what we need to do here is sort of, I mean, what black did by playing f5, f takes e4, is he got a certain strategic advantage. Like if you were to compare this to what a normal Spanish would look like, where white still has the pawn on d3 and black still has the pawn on f7, white would then later have a plan to like play c3, d4 and try to take a bigger share of the center. Because black has already played f5 and f takes e4, he has prevented that plan from happening, which means I believe fundamentally black's position is totally sound if he can complete his development. As a result, we should be looking for direct ways to try to change the nature of the game. So Aryan Gudla is getting closer, but yeah, Tori Porat as well. I really like this decision to take on c6 directly, and we're pointing out that because black hasn't castled yet, it's much more awkward to deal with just these very direct ideas to go pawn grabbing. So for example, if dc6, had black already been castled here, I think black would be very fine, but the problem is here you do not have knight takes e4. Which is a really annoying detail that black will struggle with tremendously. It's probably not over after rook e8, but like, for example, if white plays knight d3, I don't think we're taking this pawn. I think this is going to fall apart very fast. Your king ends up on d7, and this is the worst Berlin endgame I've ever seen, and I've seen some bad ones, but trust me, this one is the worst. And this looks like basically resignable for black. White got absolutely everything. So it's a problem that black can't play dc6 and has to play bc6 instead. And that all comes down to black being behind in development, which, you know, we sort of expect when they burn a move playing f5 early on in the game. So of course here critical is to take the pawn. And here we see another point is, again, had black already been castled here, he would have a very easy solution in knight takes e4, and then he'd probably be much better because we would be collapsing on the f2 square. But what happens if he takes on e4 now? Yeah, everyone sees this. So of course we have a check on h5 and black's position collapses. So black castles. So here what we have now is white has an extra pawn. That said, it's not the easiest position to convert, because black obviously has a fair amount of counterplay. His pieces will spring to life. It's hard to keep the position under control. So now white has to be a bit careful in terms of how to prosecute the advantage. So the first move shouldn't be too hard, but we should be thinking ahead at least a little bit. How does white want to proceed here? So that's some interesting moves. Try to come up with more than just one move, guys. Like, think ahead to what black is going to do in response. So for example, somebody has given me bishop g5, which seems like reasonable enough because we're pinning this knight and stopping black from taking the pawn, but black should have a lot of reasonable options here. Just wondering which one looks best. H6, for example, doesn't look bad to me, nor does bishop a6 actually, but say we go h6. You probably have to take this knight because I don't think you want to do this and let black take on e4. His pieces will get way too active, and I don't think you're really in any position to take advantage of the slightly compromised kingside. So if you have to take on f6, I really don't like giving this pair of bishops like that, two bishops against two knights. You may still be slightly better here after something like takes, knight d3, but I would worry about moves like bishop a6, rook a e8, d5, and the pieces are coming very quickly, and you're dealing with pressure on f2, and I'm not convinced this is so amazing for white. So a bunch of people have given me knight c3. Kirk says knight d3, that with the plan of play. So Kirk, you're happy to give this pawn back to simplify the position and argue that you have a better structure? Yeah, okay. So that's a step in the right direction. I definitely think that this idea that we should be ready to potentially exchange one advantage for another, and what we see is that black has this sort of crippled pawn structure here. He's got two pawn islands instead of one. The double pawns could potentially become ineffective in the long run. The a pawn could be a weak isolani. So if we can trade off the c5 bishop, this may well be something worth doing. I'm not sure about knight d3 right here, though. So let's think how black would want to proceed, because bishop g4 is legal. I'm not sure I want to play it, but it's at least feasible. Oh no, so bishop g4 is not legal. What am I talking about? Sorry guys, I'm stupid today. So Kirk's point is this position he believes is better for white. I'm wondering how much I believe that myself. Do we really think white is that much better here? Somehow I think black's pieces end up getting pretty good. Let's say he goes d6, which will restrict this bishop, and goes with bishop f5 and queen f6. This feels like a pretty good coordination, and I don't think you're going to have a very easy time attacking these pawns. So Kirk's next move was bishop e3. That's fair enough. Attack this knight. What if I bring my knight to e6? Is this really so bad for black? Rishi says the b file can be used. I'm not sure it's such a big deal. We can always play b3. And Tori says white's currently sleeping pieces on the queen side aren't the best. Sure, but I could make the same case about black's. It will be hard to get this bishop on c8 into the game. That said, somehow I don't really believe this is that amazing. Black is still very solid, and there's opposite bishops. And if black is able, like, if eventually black just goes like this and here, and all of his pieces spring to life, he's going to be doing fantastic. But the question is, can we stop that from happening or do something useful in between now and then? And my suspicion is the answer is no. I don't really see anything great. So Kirk is saying c4 in this position you want? You could do that, but let's say I start with c5, and I fix this pawn as a weakness, and I just have very easy squares for my pieces to go to like become reasonable and have no weaknesses. At some point I'm worried about the d4 square as well. I don't think this is anything too special. Oh, did I blunder this one? Yeah, sorry guys, not my day. Yeah, I wish I could say that I sacrificed it and found a way to trap the queen, but I didn't. That was just a blunder. So let's say I start with d6. Which my d5 also didn't look stupid. But let's say we go d6, and I have a plan to play with c5 and bishop b7. This doesn't look so bad for black to me. So Kirk, I think you're on the right track. There's definitely ways where we should consider trying to trade off our extra pawn in order to get rid of black's bishop pair and argue that his queenside pawn mass is ineffective. But I think there's a better way of doing it. So knight c3 as a first move is good. This is the most obvious move in the position. It's what a bunch of people gave. But the question becomes much harder after d6. Because now our knight has three directions it can look in, and none of them look perfect. So white has a very important move here. What are we going to do? Yes, Kevin Fong, you want to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So, like, I thought that if the knight goes to c4, then bishop a6 could be, like, nasty. If
Yes.
knight d3, then maybe bishop g4, and or like not, yeah, maybe bishop g4, and then the bishop retreats, and you don't have much. But if knight a4, you threaten to get rid of the bishop right away.
Not only do you threaten, you succeed. Like,
Yeah.
this bishop will not stay alive. And it's very important to trade this guy off. So there's no doubt that like black can take his pawn back. But so for example, if we're gonna go with Kirk's idea that we want to trade off this bishop pair and give the pawn back, but we look at the deficiency in black's pawn structure here, I think the deficiency is much more obvious than it was in the line that we were looking at previously. And as a result here, I think white is much better. These crippled pawns in the weakened c5 square and white's activity should really take him a long way. So Kirk was also pointing out that if we take on c6, that this is starting to go wrong after queen e8, and then say knight d5, knight e4. And we're hanging on f2, and bishop b7 is in the air, and there's all sorts of stuff that could start to go wrong here. For example, if bishop e3, I guess we could even take this one because white cannot take with the knight, which is sort of painful. It feels like this is very much going in the wrong direction. I wouldn't be surprised if even bishop b7 is reasonable in this position as well. And the black's pieces are really jumping to life. So the problem with knight d3 directly now is that this bishop gets the d4 square, which we don't like. So I think it was Kevin was saying bishop g4, but I don't like this actually. I think the bishop, the queen on e1 is very good. And it makes it easier for white to play bishop e3 next to challenge this bishop and keep everything protected. For example, after bishop d4, bishop e3, this queen is clearly very good on e1, and the bishop on g4 will only lose time. But if black starts with bishop d4 directly, I think he's totally fine. Like, there's no way we're going to keep this position properly under control. And I think black will take back his lost pawn and be okay. So instead, though, when we start with knight 4, it's much harder for black to keep everything defended. So Ariane is saying, can we do this bishop d4, queen e1 right here? Is this your question? Sure. So let's see. If we play c5, then okay. So if I play, for example, queen e8, now if you play bishop e3, I'm ready to take on e4 with the queen, which keeps the c6 pawn safe, and this doesn't look that bad for black to me. He could also potentially take with the knight on e4. So this move, queen e8, looks kind of annoying. I think we don't want to take c3 directly, of course, but as queen e8 looks pretty reasonable. It's knight g4 might also be possible, but it feels a bit, I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is going to work. Seems a little bit too outlandish. So this, I mean, my suspicion is queen e1 is the best move here, and maybe white is slightly better, but at the same time, I think it's very obvious that knight a4 is a better version because we can chase this bishop directly. And if black plays knight takes e4, now we can take this bishop and go knight takes c6, and this is a pretty healthy pawn because black doesn't really get that much compensation for it. Getting rid of this dark squared bishop lasering down on f2 like really helps a lot. Not only does it mean that f2 isn't weak, but it means that we can play f3 later to blunt the white squared bishop too. All right, so in any case here, in the game, black played queen e8, which of course is a very natural move. Makes a lot of sense. So what are we going to do now? Guys, you only get one move. Yeah, so people are saying knight d3. I like this move because if we play knight c5, now black plays queen e5 and he will take the e4 pawn, and here black should be okay. But we play knight d3. And the key difference that we see between this position and what we had done if we had started with knight d3 directly is that because it's essentially like we got to play knight a4 here, and instead of like letting black take on e4, for example, which was what he wants to play, we would convince him to play queen e8. And that gives us the time that we need to play c3. trade off this bishop and then bolster the extra pawn with f3. So basically here after knight a4, queen e8, again, like black can take his pawn back and we just don't really care. Like this position, obviously black structure is much more deficient than what we had seen previously, and white is going to be much better despite the equal material and opposite bishops. So after knight d3, in the event of bishop d4, this is the big point, is we're ready with c3. Because we managed to get this move knight a4 in. And, you know, this queen e8 doesn't really help black's position if he doesn't take this pawn. And if we go c3 and we can take on b6 and go f3, white should be a comfortable pawn up. Okay, things are not so easy, though. So there comes bishop g4. Obviously, we must play queen e1, because if queen d2, knight e4 is a tempo. Bishop d4 came. c3 is obvious enough. I think knight b6 is obvious enough. But now we get this position. And I think I had played quite a good game up to this point. But here I made a boo-boo. And I'm hoping you guys can do better. White has to be a little bit careful here. His position still is not that easy to consolidate. There's some pressure, and the opposite bishops in the long term could matter. And, you know, black's pawn structure's obviously been improved a lot by a takes b6, and his rook is awake, and so we should be at least a bit careful here. How should White proceed to secure his advantage? And yeah, Kirk is making a nice point that e5, bishop f5 could be an issue. So, yeah, let's be careful here. Keep in mind, try to see more than one move ahead. So if you're just giving me one move, especially if it's the most obvious move in the position, you should have some idea of how you want to proceed if black plays the most obvious move in response. Okay, so Venkata has said f3, bishop e6, and then a3 protects everything. Are you sure? Don't know, this doesn't look so easy. I mean, it turns out this is good for white, but you should have some idea about that before you pull the trigger on it. So queen e3, and then say black goes d5. If queen d1, Kirk, can I take this one? I suspect I can. Well, I don't know, actually. Let's see. So takes, knight f2, and this is a nasty move, but maybe it's not actually threatening anything. I don't know. Maybe we can get away with queen d1, but knight e4 looks scary, but maybe it's nothing to worry about. So takes. What if we take queen e4? Knight f2, yeah. Okay, but this is probably okay for black. Once he takes that rook on f1, the first question of any like pieces versus rook scenario or exchange stack, first question whenever we're dealing with that is how good are the rooks? And here black's rooks are quite good, so I think black should be fine once he takes on f1 and goes rook a8. So the question then would be, can we get away with like being super greedy like this and knight f2? And does white have anything here? I suspect the answer is actually no. It looks like black is out of steam. The second white plays bishop e3, the game is over, so yeah, I don't think this is working. So Kirk's gone with queen d1. I guess knight e4 does not work, but perhaps black can still play d5. Don't know, this doesn't strike me as totally trivial. Feels like annoying compensation, at least. But, so let's go back here and think a little more about how white should proceed. I think somebody came up with a pretty good option, actually. But, sure. So Hrishi says knight f4, maybe. So Kirk says b3 is sneaky. b3 is a mistake, but black needs to react very appropriately. Let's try to figure this out from black's point of view, guys. How does, what should black play here? There's a little trick. Yeah, okay, Hrishi, you're missing a move in there, but this is right. So, Hrishi, you want to share your variation with us?
Okay. So my variation was queen takes e4, and then take back knight e4, f3. But you can take on c3 because the problem is if you take the bishop, there's knight e2 and rook f1.
This pawn on b2 is now sorely missed, and the problem is white is unable to take the bishop here, and I don't think the tactics work out for him. So, b3 from Kirk is a clever idea. To try to, presumably, Kirk, your point was you wanted to go f3 next, and when the bishop moves away, you could play something like c4 or just bishop out, and you don't have to compromise the white squares. But concretely, yeah, it seems to fail because there is this queen e4 trick. I think actually it's pretty reasonable to just play f3 and give up the a2 pawn. A couple people have given me that, which it's not dumb. Forget exactly what was best, actually. This wasn't supposed to be the most critical moment. But yeah, I'm pretty sure f3 is right, but I think we either have to give up the a2 pawn or do something direct. I'm actually going to cheat here because a lot of people have given interesting lines, but we're going to put the computer on. Yeah, f3 is right, and then bishop e6. Did it want to just give up the pawn? Yeah, so I like this line. I think I remembered liking this. Yeah, just give this pawn up with e5, and then play a position like this one, where after knight e5, black probably doesn't want to self-pin, but he ends up in this line here with bishop g5. Yeah, so I was right. Just giving the pawn on a2 makes a lot of sense. And here, strategically, black is in some trouble because the crippled queen side will like matter forever, especially if we ever end up with bishop against knight in either direction. If we end up with white bishop against black knight or white knight against black bishop, either way, as long as we don't like have opposite bishops on the board, long term this can be a huge problem for black. And I think that white's position looks pretty good here. This would definitely be what I believe white should have done. I think this is the easiest way. The computer found some way, I think, to make a3 hold together, but it just feels very inhuman and d5 is coming. I'm going to just cheat and see what it has to say. So yeah, queen d1, Kirk's move is only move. Knight e4 does fail because of this move knight f2. Yeah, knight f2 is there. And then if we go d5, what gives? E takes d5, and then apparently, yeah, okay, queen g6, there's knight e5, if rook d8, rook e1, and apparently we don't have enough. So that's some computer stuff, which is very difficult. Queen d1 is a very tough move, especially because it really looks like we're blundering knight e4. But I do think it sort of holds together. I think the more human response is to play e5, and then just make sure that, because here, like, if black takes on a2, he doesn't really have a deficient structure because you can't attack anything, and more importantly, he doesn't have any he can't make a pass pawn, but neither can you. Well, after e5 comes, and we get this structure, here this really is a long-term deficient pawn structure. This is the kind of thing you see in Small Steps Giant Improvement that I wrote about, is that this pawn mass will not make a passer in the long term, and that could really matter quite a bit. It also sort of feels like it can get attacked. Anyhow, in the game, I played c4. And my point here was prophylaxis against bishop e6, and I sort of had the same idea as Kirk that I want to have prophylaxis against bishop e6, but I don't want to weaken the c3 square. So here, this trick with queen e4 will not work because I have left the pawn on b2, so there's no more knight c3. So c4, I mean, and this is your typical grandmaster mistake. I wasn't that strong at the time. I was only like 26, 60, whatever. I was still quite a bit weaker than I am now, but I was reasonable enough. This is your typical grandmaster mistake. It's just a bad move. It's wrong, but it has a clear purpose. It makes perfect sense, and you can easily see why you would make it. So let's see if you guys can figure out how black should proceed here to punish me for this mistake. And it's a very difficult move for black, but it is there. And I think if you don't find it, then c4 makes perfect sense. Let's think a little bit more carefully than just throwing out a move and saying this maybe without any thoughts behind it. Yes, Chen Xuanling, that's absolutely right. Do you want to share your answer with us?
So I played queen e6 first, attacking the c4 pawn. And then the purpose of this move is after white plays b3. Then
Yeah.
you can play queen 6 e4.
We've provoked the pawn to b3, and now this variation works again. Right? So very well spotted. This queen e6 move is really nice. It's a very tough move to see because it looks so dumb, but like also, you know, f3, it feels like this bishop is almost dropped, but it just works out. There's queen takes c4 here. And by provoking the pawn to b3, black will be ready for queen takes e4 next, and then he will equalize. So this is a very tough move, but it's there. Instead, Timur played bishop e6, and, well, again, this is your typical grandmaster mistake. It's a bad move, it's not best, he had a better option, but again, it's not that easy to deal with. So white's first move is obvious enough. We played b3, but okay, here comes b5. Now what? Let's think a little more carefully, guys. This is a critical decision. So try to find actual variations, don't just guess at moves. So a couple of people have given me e5. If we expect the game to proceed d takes e5, knight takes e5, then that is the end of the variation. White is much better. But of course, black is not going to play after e5, he's not going to play d5. He has multiple other moves there to consider. A couple of people have given me c5. This is just a blunder check. Always examine all checks and captures after c5, bishop b3. Things are going very wrong. So let's not do that. And in the event of c takes b5 as well, again, examine all checks and captures. Bishop takes b3 should be bad news for you. You're going to lose control of the position, and you're definitely not going to keep your extra pawn. So we can't move our c pawn basically. So e5 sort of calls attention to itself, but we should at least have some idea of what's going on before we pull the trigger, even if it feels like you almost have to do it just by elimination. People are giving me knight b2. Is that too passive? Yeah, that looks really ugly. I mean, let's put it this way. Knight b2 is a move you play because you have to play it, not because you want to play it. After knight b2 and like black takes this pawn, if you take with the knight, he can take and take e4. So you end up taking this way, and then let's say black goes c5 and gets ready to regroup with his knight coming to b6 and the queen to f7. I don't think c4 will survive. I certainly don't think white can be better here. So, is it 100% compensation? Kirk asks. My suspicion is black might even be playing for an advantage here, but I'm not sure. I mean, like, as soon as this knight comes to b6, like, I definitely think you're worse. So the question is, can you do something in between now and then? I don't know. This is probably equal. Let's see what machine says. It says white's a little better. But, okay, specifically because a4, a5 immediately stops the knight from coming to b6. Also, the evaluation is dropping. And after a4, it's just giving up the c4 pawn. If we were to play e5, which feels more thematic, it's hard for me to believe white can ever be better here with the c4 pawn so weak. Knight b2, I mean, look, it's a damage control move. I mean, it's not terrible, but I think we can be much more to the point than that. So let's see if we can consider e5, how we think the game might proceed after that, and whether this works well for white. Because if it doesn't, you can always go knight b2, and you're probably not worse. It should just be around equal. But I think if we can make e5, if we can make this move work, we definitely should. So Venkata says bishop f5 is scary. That it is. So is b takes c4. If you're going to play e5, you want to be ready for both of these moves. So Kirk has an interesting variation. Let's take a look. So e5, bishop f5, he's giving ef6, bishop d3, fg7, and now king g7. This one should be horrible for black. After queen c3, yeah, okay, now here he just loses, actually. There's bishop h6 at the end. But black will play rook f7. And I don't really believe in white's attack if he's down material here. With the dark squared bishop, I don't think you're going to give mate. And here, again, we should always evaluate. The first question we always ask whenever we're considering any kind of exchange, any kind of, multiple pieces for the rook, is how good are the rooks? And here I believe the rooks are good. So this, I think, should be pretty reasonable for black. You could try this one, but I don't know. Are we that happy with this endgame? 3 connected passers are not messing around. It just looks massively unclear, yeah? Kirk says bishop c2. It's probably reasonable too. Yeah, this looks like black should be fine as well. It's probably just a repetition. So I don't think that works so well. Black definitely should not play king g7. That certainly changes the evaluation heavily in white's favor. Like white just wins on the spot. So but these are the kinds of lines you want to be calculating before pulling the trigger on e5. You want to make sure you know what you're doing. And in fact, that line, it looked like, at least from what we saw, it looked okay for black. So let's see if we can find anything better. So Guru, queen b4, but after bc4, like in c5, everything will hang. c4 is loose, e4 is loose, it all falls down. So Chen Schwanling is an interesting point. So first of all, if e5, if bc4, this position I think should work out okay for white. Because here, black did not manage to get 3 connected passed pawns together, and this g7 pawn, I don't think black can ever really take it while the queens remain on the board. Now, I don't think white should put any particular effort into keeping that pawn alive. But the real point is, I think that white is doing a much better job of containing black's central pawn mass. Like, having this pawn still on the board to just stop this guy from running straight through should help a lot. And if we can take d3 or coordinate well, or even start running the a pawn, I think this should be very good for white. So the real question then becomes what after bishop f5? And we have a couple interesting suggestions. So Chen Xuanling has suggested knight c5, which is wacky, but maybe not stupid. Let me see what I can do. But perhaps here can I play dc5 and bishop d3 again and try to take advantage of this rook? I guess, yeah, this should be okay for black. I think. I don't know, though, actually. Let's say we go fg7, and then rook f7, and white just gives this exchange. This might be pretty reasonable for white all of a sudden, because the c5 pawn is very weak. And I think that, like, for example, if we compare this to this line where we were looking at this position, if we just give the exchange here, I think the problem isn't so much that black takes the exchange. I think the problem is that he takes this pawn first. And that now we have this, you know, Voltron of pawns over here that are going to start running and causing a lot of trouble. So this line that Chen Xuan has given with knight c5 makes a fair degree of sense for that reason. But somehow I suspect black should be fine here. I'm trying to figure out how I would prove it, but let's see. Maybe I can even just go for an endgame. Let's say we go takes, we take this one and take this one. I think the problem is just dynamically black should be fast enough to play moves like b takes c4 and bishop d3 or something. Yeah, a couple of people have given me a better solution. In fact, here actually I'm thinking in this position, it might even make more sense to take with the pawn on f6 just to restrict the bishop a bit, not let rook e5 come, and bishop d3 is in the air. And so, like, but okay, let's say we get this position. The problem is, like, if you take this one, obviously black is fine, but if you don't take it and black goes like take and bishop d3 and rook a4 and grabs this pawn and material is getting reduced, it feels very close to a draw. So a couple people have given the best move, which is knight b4. Because this way, you know, we're losing back our extra pawn, but at least here black structure will end up crippled. So the game now continues with de5. So now we have a decision to make. How do we want to proceed here? First move shouldn't be too hard, I don't think. So a couple people are giving me bishop b2. This makes good sense. But after take, and queen e6, black is getting direct counterplay, and we need to figure out how to deal with it. So, or is this, hang on. Can we play c5 here? No, c5 just takes an exchange. Yeah, we can't do it, sorry. We can't play bishop b2. c5 will take an exchange. We need to do something else. And this is where white has to find an important move. And figuring out how to coordinate the pieces best. Bishop e3 to go rook c1 in the future. That is probably the second best way of playing. But I think we can coordinate our pieces better than that. So, people are pointing out, someone says queen e2 prevents bishop d3 and queen c4. Sure, but while queen e2 might prevent like you from losing material directly, I still don't really think you want to let black play c5. Like, this changes the structure in a way that I do not think you will enjoy. He's gaining more space, he's kicking your knight away. So a couple people have given me c5, but I think this critically weakens the white squares and releases a lot of pressure that you might have been able to get with c takes b4 later. So for example here, a couple of people have said knight d5, bishop b2, but this looks not so scary to me. For example, like, if I take this one and then play e4, so no, I mean, it's a little scary at least. Sort of hard for me to imagine this can be that great for white. So we definitely would, I would really like to keep these pawns on the board because I'd like to go c takes b5 and then abuse the open c file and the weakened c5 square and stuff like that. But the question is, how do we do that? So bishop e3 is not a bad move, but somehow it doesn't coordinate as well. The bishop is somewhat in the way and of white's queen and whatnot, and I think the bishop can serve a more active role. Sepahur is saying bishop g5. The idea of c5, bishop f6, rook f6, knight d5, but what if I play cb4? And now you have a problem. Bishop d3 is on the way. So I don't think that works either. I mean, a real goal here, like, I think bishop b2 is the best score for the bishop. Like, this is just where the bishop wants to go. The problem is bc and c5 comes. So yeah, people are getting this. We go queen e3. This stops black from playing c5, and then we can hope to play bishop b2 later. But still not so easy. So take, and now queen e6. And black is looking for very direct counterplay. This pawn is annoying to defend. So what do we do now? There's some calculation to be done around here. So be careful, guys. I see a couple people making mistakes. At this point, I spent a fair amount of time and calculated a really nice line. So let's see if you guys can figure out what that might be. Like, let's not just guess, like, let's actually calculate variations. Nobody's calculated a single variation, guys. Come on, we need to actually think. If you just type a move to me and then hope that it's right, that's not helpful. That's not helping you develop your chess. You want to really force yourself. This is a critical position. Like, white has to think very carefully. So Sepahur is getting closer to the right direction, playing bishop a3 and giving this pawn on c4 away so that there's so that we can break through on the c file. But bishop a3 also sort of miscoordinates the pieces. So for example, what if I play this move, which freezes all your guys in place and gets me ready for rook fa8 next? I'm starting to get scared. You don't have a good discovery with this knight, and rook fa8 is not going to be fun to deal with next move. So this is closer, but I think that was wrong. So let's see if we can find a better move. So a couple of people have given me queen c5. That's not totally ridiculous, but I also don't think it's best. So let me see, how would black want to play this? See a few reasonable moves. So one thing we could consider is just starting to attack this queen and go rook fb8 and looking for direct counterplay. And it's pretty annoying for white to keep the position under control. We're attacking a lot of stuff. Another thing black could do is play bishop e4 to protect this pawn and meet f3 with knight d7 and then c5. I actually kind of like that one more. The queen is kicked away and we go c5 next, and then, yeah. Or even, depending where the queen goes. Like, if you go queen f2, I can even take this one maybe, but if queen e3 and I go c5, I think black has to be fine. Too much counterplay. So I don't love that. Think about it. What's the move we really want to play? Whenever there's a move you really want to make, but your opponent stops you from doing so for some reason, the first question you should always ask yourself is, what happens if I do it anyway? We specifically played queen e3 to prevent black from playing c5, so that we had the b2 square for the bishop. Now, it looks like bishop b2 might not be great here, but we should be thinking, what happens if I do it anyway? Because that is the best square for the bishop. So see if someone can actually answer that question. So Venkata, you want to share with us?
Yeah, you can just play bishop b2 because if queen takes c4, you'll always have a3, and knight d5 never works because e5 hangs.
Yeah, so a3 is a really important move. It secures the pawn, it secures the knight, the rook on the a file is no longer an issue. We're ready for rook ac1 next, and where we're really going to break through here, the way you win this game is not taking e5. The way you win this game is going rook c1, rook c6, rook c7, other rook to c1. And this looks extremely promising for white. But there's still a variation to calculate here, which hopefully you guys would be ready for. So knight g4 comes, and black is looking for direct counterplay. White should be very careful here. His queen is running a little short on squares. You certainly don't want to let black play c5. And the pieces are starting to become annoyingly active for black. So what does white do now? We need a real variation again. So a couple people have given me queen c1. Do we think that's the end of the line, or is there something to calculate after that? I'm sure. Queen c1, if black takes it and we go rook ac1, then yes, black's position is horrific and probably just lost. But after queen c1, is black going to completely buckle, or is he going to keep fighting? Should have some idea of how the game continues. Kirk says queen f4, not buckle. That looks like buckling after queen takes f4 and rook ac1. But what do I know? Queen c1, what's the most aggressive move black can play to bring his queen as close to your junk as possible? Yeah, everyone's saying queen e2 now. So the real question is, are we ready to meet queen c1, queen e2? If we can do that, then great. Otherwise, we're in trouble. Someone says queen c1, bishop d3. I would think then just queen c4 and rook fc1 should be very good for white. Maybe not, though. There's rook f2 there. But rook a b1, bishop is hit, h3 is coming. I don't know, messy, but bishop d3 shouldn't be the issue. After bishop d3, probably also just taking it and then playing h3 and queen c6 is good. So, all right. So Kirk says queen c1, queen e2, h3 looks good. Do we believe black's going to resign here? A couple of you have given me knight f6, rook e1. That's essentially black resigning. Do we believe he's going to resign, or is he going to keep throwing wood on the fire? Yeah, bishop e4 is coming. And now what do we do? Be careful. Full variations, please. So a couple people have given me this line hg4, queen g4, queen c4 check with f3 to follow. Examine all checks and captures, please, and find the bad news. Yeah, bishop takes g2 and collapse. Yeah, here queen g4 is going to hurt. That's going to hurt a lot. So we can't do that. Kirk is saying queen e1, queen b2, hg4, rook f4. That looks pretty good for black, doesn't it? So should calculate better than that. Queen D1 someone is given, but okay, like B2 is hanging at the bare minimum. So Queen D1, Rook takes F2 looks horrible. Yeah, okay. So, sorry, Kirk, what's your line from the top then? It looks like you might have it. Yeah. All right, you want to share that with us? All right, you can turn on your microphone.
Queen e1 is strong because after queen takes b2, queen e4, when queen takes c4, knight takes f2, queen c4 check, king h8, rook a2 wins the piece.
Yeah, this is a very important resource. Rook a2 at the end, which wins the knight. So here white would be a piece up, and like also after rook takes f2, we can just take this one, and white is a piece up as well. So yeah, this move queen e1 is important. Ideally, you would see it before pulling the trigger on like this queen e3 bishop b2 business. But yeah, this move queen e1 at the end of the line is very important. So Timur realized this as well, but the problem is here, like, there's not much else to do because he played knight f6, and now after this check and knight takes c6, the position gets very difficult. Black's king is wide open, and so, for example, the game continued with take, knight e5. And while material is nominally equal, like Black's position is under tremendous pressure because knight f7 check, there's endless threats, and c7 is hanging. So, for example, Timur played queen a5, and all right, last position that we have, guys. What should white do to put maximum pressure on black here to give him as much trouble as possible? It's still not like totally winning, but it's pretty bad for black. But we have to find the way to put his maximum pressure. Find a 2-move continuation, and then we'll call it a day. Yes, Ariane, well spotted. Do you want to share with us? All right. Hit me. Yeah, Owen sees it as well. Ariane, you can turn on the mic.
So we play knight f7 check.
Yeah.
And now we play rook d1 because he cannot take the rook. Knight on f7 because of rook d8 checkmate.
Right. This is a very important move. It brings the last piece into the game. Not only does it stop, not only can black not take the knight, but more importantly, he can't use the d5 square, which is the really big issue. Of course, we don't have a smothered mate because black can go knight takes g8. And if we do any other discovered check with the knight, like someone gave me this in knight e6, but of course black is going to play queen d5, and now he's fine. But when we play rook d1, black cannot fix the coordination. He cannot get out of the discovered check. He cannot threaten white's queen. He cannot use the d5 square. And the position just becomes very difficult. So, for example, there came queen h5, and now knight e5 check, and just rook e1, and black can barely moves. And, for example, he felt the need to play knight g8, which is a very bad sign. And now, okay, among other things, white is a pawn up and pressing forever. I think if black were able to get the queens off the board, he probably should hold this. But with the queens on, his king is just going to come under so much heat, and he didn't last long. Like, it went queen f5, and then here there came g4. And already the position is just collapsing. He can try queen c8, but it's really ugly. Instead, after this, rook e4 was bad news. Queen f6 and like knight d7, and yeah, this rook is forced away, and g5 comes, and black is just done for. Like, again, his king is just this big issue. Like, it will basically, his king is just going to hang in every single variation is the real problem. Like the back rank and all that. So anyway, that was this game. Lots of interesting moments, lots of good stuff there. Certainly far from perfect, and black could have certainly saved himself if he had played queen e6 and then queen takes e4. That being said, that's all there is. I'll take like 2 or 3 questions for general Q&A, and then we'll call it a day. So anyone have any questions they'd like answered? No questions? None whatsoever. Wow, I must be a boring dude. Should you prep before or during a tournament, or a combination of both? Certainly a combination of both. You know, like if you come to a tournament totally blank, you're gonna have to work a lot harder to prepare during the event to not deal with some disasters. But if you think you can prepare for everything in a tournament in advance, like I got bad news for you. You're not going to. I mean, in general, constant chess work is important. Who is the toughest opponent you face? Carlsen, of course. I mean, he's so much better than everybody else. He didn't even like do anything that amazing to him. We've drawn both of our games, but he had black in both of them, and he's definitely the toughest by quite a lot. How much time should you prep for your opponent? I don't know. It depends on your opponent. Depends if it's one game a day or two. I usually do like 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 4 if I'm feeling energized, or if it's a game that I think will have a really deep theoretical battle or something like that. All right, I'll take one last question. This was the statement. That doesn't count as a question. Last question. Who's the second best player in the world in your opinion? That's actually a really good question. I mean, in theory, we should find out because I think like the main names you would consider for second best player in the world are all playing in the candidates. So, you know, those guys are, I guess, whoever wins that tournament would have a pretty valid claim. I kind of think it's Ding, and I sort of have for a long time. But I'm maybe biased because of all the guys with like the highest ratings in the world. He's the only one who has like a really nasty score against me. Everyone else hasn't given me a ton of trouble except for him. So I'm somewhat biased in that my experience with him is really painful. I would probably say it's Ding. I think Report is a real sleeper. I really think he's very much in the question there. If you look at his rating, it's a little lower, but it's because it was a lot lower before, and he's just gaining rating every tournament. I think it's probably one of Report, Ding, or Ferrugia, but I'm pretty confident it's Ding. And as to who will win the candidates, who's the second best player in the world and who will win the candidates are two very different questions. I think that, if Ding is the second best player in the world, my suspicion is that makes his odds of winning the candidates like 20% compared to the average, which is like 12%. And probably the worst player in that tournament is still going to have like, a 5% chance of winning. So I think these guys are close enough in strength that the odds of any one player winning is not wildly high. And I would actually go so far as you could pick any 2 players you want in this tournament against the other 6. I will always take the 6. So I honestly think if anybody wants to just take Ding and Ferrugia, I would think it's more likely that we'll get one of the other 6 than those 2. And does Hikaru have any chance? Absolutely. I think everybody has a chance. All right. That'll do it for now. Good to see everybody. Good session. I look forward to seeing you guys next time.